Hey guys, welcome back to the Caderna podcast. I'm your host, Brian Caderna. So for any of you adventurous souls out there, this is the episode you will not want to miss. Today's guest is Jeff Bonaldi, the founder and CEO of the Explorer's Passage. This could be considered one of the coolest travel agencies I've ever heard of. Jeff's objective is to use his organization to help tackle the world's most important social and environmental issues through adventure travel experiences across the planet. The Explorer's Passage partners with the world's leading visionaries, scientists, and institutions to provide travelers with a more immersive and impactful experience. His trips have prompted collaboration with National Geographic, Disney, Afar, and more. You can check it out at explorerspassage.com. But before founding this awesome company, Jeff had spent 15 years on Wall Street at both Merrill Lynch and Citibank. During his time in banking, he participated on various advisory boards and was a regular speaker at conferences and workshops across the country. So today, not only do we discuss one of my greatest passions of travel and adventure, but we learn the inside story of transition, a story of how Jeff left a corporate job that had run its course to pursue a dream of his from childhood to go be an explorer. Today, Jeff is a contributing writer to Entrepreneur Magazine and is a TEDx speaker. So without further ado, help me welcome Jeff Bonaldi.
Is going to require work and time and sweat and toil.
If money wasn't an issue, what would I be doing?
Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out.
Change is the only constant.
The Caderna Podcast.
Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be on the program, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm a huge fan of travel, and it's been tough, man, this past year. It's like there's been no vacation for the family, and we're all just kind of cooped up here.
Yeah, and I get that. How are you feeling? Are you feeling like you're, once things really start to open up, you can't wait to get out there again?
Yeah, we'd love to. I mean, my situation is a little unique now because the kids are all in high school. So we're kind of, at that time where there's always a sport, there's a job, there's a big test coming up. So yeah, I think even when things do open up, it's tough to find kind of that long weekend or that week getaway. But yeah, it's definitely something we're dying to do right now.
No, I get that.
Yeah. And how's it been affecting you? I mean, how are you doing throughout this pandemic?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a bit of an interesting time. I mean, you talked a little bit about my background on the, in the beginning of the call. I spent 15 years in the banking industry, and I left the banking industry in 2018. But the story kind of goes back I would say a long ways before that, where I midway through that process in banking, or that time in banking, I started to feel I started to feel like I wasn't going in the right direction. I was very fortunate to have a great job. I worked with some amazing people and had a fantastic manager, but I wasn't passionate and I wasn't engaged about what I was doing. And, in early 2000, and let's say about 10 years ago, in 2011, I was going through a lot of changes in my personal life. I had gone through a divorce, and I was thinking about, what could be next. Right. And around that time, I went for the first hike of my life, which is pretty, I'm 43 now, and it happened when I was 33. And I'm not sure why it took so long for me to get involved in nature and exploration, but I'm really feel very fortunate that I found it. And I started to really fall in love with adventure and exploring, not just, I started exploring the East Coast of the United States, and then the United States. And then I started climbing and doing adventures all over the world. I noticed that it made me feel very, very different than I did at working at banking. And I was really at that point where it's like, I was trying to follow what felt right in life. Right. A lot of us, leave college and we do what we think we're supposed to do, right? What family or society tells us to do. And a lot of those things didn't make me so happy. So I started to see that, well, maybe I could, start a company started on the side where I could take people on these special experiences and have that same, transformations that I was having. And it started out in 2014. We launched at the New York Times Travel Show. We had a really good reception, and the company ended up growing and building from there to the point where I was finally able to I felt comfortable enough to able to leave banking in 2018. So it's been roughly 3 years now, and company was doing very, very well right before the pandemic up to March of last year. And, obviously that was a bit of a scary time for me.
Sure.
I didn't have that kind of that safety net in the corporate world. And I had to figure out how to make my money, obviously selling trips. And we have a staff and overnight we weren't able to sell the product that we were producing. So it definitely was at first a scary time. Coincidentally, the year before I had started a consulting business where we work with nonprofits and companies who have missions for the world to help them grow. And in retrospect, it was good that I had started that, because I started to kind of really ramp that up last March, which obviously helped from the financial aspect. And in terms of the travel, I ended up trying to take a positive from it. I'm always looking at, what can I learn from these different things that are happening. So I don't necessarily look at anything as good or bad, but I look at how is this working for me? How can I make a positive out of this? And I spent a lot of time looking at the way we were marketing our products, looking at our staff, doing a lot of introspection. And it was actually a time of great learning for me last year. And we were able to really fine tune a lot of areas of the company that if COVID didn't happen, I would never have gotten to. So kind of a little bit of a blessing in disguise. And we had no really activity, no like sales activity from like March till early September. But when we remarketed it in our new way starting in July, we started to see a lot of inquiries and a lot of activity. And I'll say we started to see trip bookings in September, not for September, but in September for later this year, later in 2021. And the last 90 days, like we have actually exploded in terms of interest and
That's
actually
awesome.
bookings as well. So more for the third and fourth quarter of this year. But I truly believe that the work that we did in the downtime was able to, and the clarity that I was able to see and that the team was able to see, has really powered us has really positioned us really well for the future. So yeah, I mean, long answer, but
No, that's good.
challenging year, but I think you have to figure out where there's a positive in everything, and I think we did.
Yeah, there's always that silver lining there. And
Yeah.
I've talked with a lot of business owners that, one of the things, even myself with my own practice, that we struggle with sometimes is we get so caught up in the business that we don't take that moment to step back and work kind of on the business.
Exactly.
And this forced that moment of reflection. But what I often, say to my peers, I'm like, a week or even a month of reflection was great, but now going on like almost a year, it's kind of like we're itching, all to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, so a lot of the people now that are booking, which is fantastic, they're going into like third or fourth quarter of 2021.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of interest in August and
Okay.
onwards. So August through December of later the year, I think people feel, they're starting to see the vaccinations. I know in January, last month in the US, we had about, I think 36 million people vaccinated, right? Which is about 10% of our country. So if you do the math, which I think a lot of people are feeling pretty confident that, starting in August, September, we should be in pretty good shape here in the United States and the rest of the world. So, yeah. And interestingly enough, when we do get bookings, a lot of people aren't really asking about COVID. We probably get that question 1% of the time. They're more interested in the trips that we're offering, and where they could potentially go next. So we do obviously have COVID procedures for our trips in terms of social distancing and other procedures that we've put in place, but it's clients are not actually asking about it that much.
Yeah. So it hasn't been kind of like the general public's fear so much as more like the government restriction over what we're all able to do, where we're able to go.
Yeah. Like, can you, you book the trip, can you get into this country? Right. because certain countries have restrictions in terms of getting in. But I'd say a fair amount of the countries are pretty open at the moment. It's just that there are certain protocols that you have to follow. Like, for example, like a Costa Rica, an American can travel pretty freely there at the moment, but there are protocols. So like you have to take a test upon arrival. If you are positive, then you do have to go into quarantine, right? Iceland has a pretty similar situation. You can make a choice. You can either take a test. If you prove that you're negative, you can travel freely. If you don't, then you can elect to quarantine. So most countries are pretty open. There's some countries that like a New Zealand or Australia that are still much more closed off from the world at the moment. But we're seeing a lot of progress. We're seeing a lot of progress and a lot of openness, and then we're seeing a lot of people even now. Like some of my friends who own travel companies, they're seeing a lot of people travel even now.
That's great. And are you seeing more of that be international, like you mentioned, or people like, I'll start out with something domestic and then in a couple of years we'll go abroad, or everybody's just dying to get out of here?
Yeah. In terms of my company, most of our travel is international. So we're seeing a lot of bookings internationally, and most of our clients are international as well. So say 20% of our clients are US based and the rest come from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of my friends, again, who are, whether they're high up in travel companies or CEOs, a lot of them are seeing a boom in domestic travel, specifically around like the national parks. If you think about how many people have had on their bucket list since they were little that they would rent one of those the vans, right, and travel across the country from park to park. And there's a lot of families doing that. There's a lot of people who are getting have had the chance to work remotely over this time, that are working remotely from the national parks in different parking lots and whatnot. So an explosion in I would say domestic national park travel, and then obviously the people who are a little more have a little more money or means to do it, booking these kind of more high-end private vacations and lodges within national parks. That's been very popular as well.
That is so cool. I think that's one thing we've all learned from this is you can do so much work remote. Even now, I mean, our offices are open, but probably 4 days a week, I'm here at home, at my home office, functioning just fine with Zoom and everything else. So that I would imagine would help travel because you can almost work from anywhere. So you can.
Yeah. It's a good point. And interestingly enough too, for me, I'm someone who, not just when I running my travel company, but even before, while I was in banking, I was used to traveling 120 to 150 days a year for probably the last 10 years. And I haven't been on a plane since 13 months. So I got back from a scouting trip in Antarctica on January 4th of last year. And I haven't been on a plane. And for me too, I think that I always felt that I needed to go on a decent number of our experiences to make sure everything was being run right. And I think this time over the past year taught me a little bit too, that I could let go a bit more. We have a great team around the world. There's a lot of people that do a great job that I trust. And it allowed me the opportunity to be home more, which, I'm very fortunate to have a great home life. And to really be in one place and focus on what I talked about on that reflection and expanding the company. So it's lessons all over around about kind of what we could take from COVID.
Sure. And I wanted to ask you that too, from kind of a business standpoint. Like, what is the business? Do you have some employees, or is it just you have contractors all over the globe that come to you, or how is that structured?
Yeah. No, we have, so how the travel industry works is like, we have our, the Explorers Passage is a tour operator, right? So we have, our own team of employees that, that kind of work mostly in the United States, but everyone obviously with COVID is working remotely. But in terms of like who we deal with around the globe, we contract with guide teams, right? So that essentially operate under our brand.
Okay.
So we do an extensive process when we go into a new country on looking at, who the top guides are, right? The most experience they have, their safety record, their their experience, their knowledge on the territory, their knowledge in the territory that we're traveling. And, once we go through that extensive process, then we contract with them to assist us in running our experiences in those individual countries. So I think we're roughly in about 15 countries right now. We have about 15 to 17 tours. So we don't operate everywhere in the world, and I don't think I don't really want us to be everywhere, but I want us to be the best at the places where we do go.
Okay. And is that all on you? Like, do you get to go out and scout all these countries and the various teams that you work with? Or that almost sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, so everything on our website, all our tours I've been, so we don't offer anything that I haven't been to.
Okay.
So that process I did have a very big part of, but I do think that we have a really good process, an evaluation process in place on how we do that. So, and we have a really great team here. So I do envision that I'm gonna kind of let go of that process a little more and have our team become a bigger part of that. So I can just focus more on, growth and more the direction of the company going forward. But yeah.
I think that can be kind of a nerve-wracking jump sometimes when you let go of the reins a little bit and, hand off that responsibility. I know I've struggled with it personally, and other business owners I work with have as well.
It's really hard. It's that whole these companies that we build are our babies. Mm-hmm. And that's been it's been a real journey for me to let go. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you just got to let go and you just got to, move on so you can make more space. But it's not, letting go doesn't happen in a single decision, right? That's kind of a misnomer. I think letting go is a long-term, multi-year, even a decade process. And that's okay, right? Because, you have something that you've taken so much time to build and create, and you're expecting you're delivering a certain level of excellence to your customers. There's some danger in letting go too quickly, right? There's also some danger in not letting go at all. So I think it's a process. I think, as I look at it, is I let go as I feel like I have the team trained and the right people to continue the level of excellence that we strive to deliver. And if we can't deliver that, then I hold up for a little bit, right? So it's been a challenge, but I think we're starting to get much better at it, and I'm really fortunate to have, I think, one of the best teams in the travel industry to help really move the company forward.
That's great. And along those lines, do you I just lost my train of thought. What I wanted to ask you about, kind of, building out that team. When you jumped into this business, was it really just you, or did you have, a friend or a partner or somebody that was like, hey, this is such a cool idea, we should embark on? Or was this kind of like, you were like, screw it, I'll do it on my own, and then we'll build a team as we go?
Yeah, no, it was actually just me at first. And I was the sole owner, and I still am. I think from being in the corporate world, I felt like I was controlled a bit, right? Obviously it was my choice to be in the corporate world, and I had so many benefits of having that safety net and whatnot. So I can't, I don't want to talk negatively there, but I think for me, I didn't like the aspect where I did have a part of my fate was controlled by the bank, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew that when I started a company that I didn't want to have that same level of control over me. So I wanted to start it alone. I wanted to be the sole owner. I didn't want to take debt out for the business. So that's why I built it on the side. It took me 6 years, nights and weekends, to build it on the side. And I didn't want any equity partners because I didn't want them to have any say in any of my decisions that I was making as well. So, while it maybe took me a little longer to get it up and running, I do have the autonomy and the control to take it to the direction that I want to. And I'm happy I made that decision, and, it's funny. A lot of people ask me, they're like, do you believe in like the leap of faith, where you just, you're in this job and you just start a company and then you take a leap and to launch the new company? Or do you believe on starting a company slowly on the side? And I'm 110% for having a job while you start a new company. I don't think the company could have grown any quicker if I had taken the leap of faith. I think it takes time for these companies to grow. I feel like companies take 4 to 5 years to become profitable enough where you can earn an income for yourself. And and I think I kind of wanted to learn each of the lessons, right? There's this whole, you see a lot of people right now where they're 22 years old, they have an idea and they get funding for their idea. And I wish everyone all the success in that. And I think there's a lot of people who can make that work, but I think you lose a little bit of that journey, right? You're not able to integrate each of the ups and downs that go along with it if you're bringing in this like professional team. So I implore people to really take their time, right? To take their time to build it slowly, to learn the lessons. And, at the same time as I was still learning and earning income while I was in banking. Mm-hmm. So I was learning in like 2 different areas. And I felt, the knowledge that I have from the banking world is invaluable, right? And it helps me each and every day. And the network that I have from there helps me each and every day as I continue to build this company. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so good starting out to kind of get exposed to each, aspect of the business, because I've always thought that, if you, those people that maybe do the GoFundMe and they have a little team set up, and then, things kind of deviate as time goes on. And then 5 years down the road, that business owner has to look back and relearn something that they missed. And, it might be a bigger mistake now than it could have been 5 years ago. So exactly. It's certainly a good experience without a doubt. And it's something I think all entrepreneurs benefit from, all that experience. And I wanted to ask you, going back to kind of the genesis of this, 1, why did you go into finance and banking? And 2, I know you said that hike was kind of like a tipping point for you at 33, but did you know you wanted to get in travel, or was travel something that you were always into even as a kid at all? Or, how did some of that kind of evolve?
Yeah. So the first question is, I went to the College of New Jersey for my undergraduate. And when I was, I know you did as well. And it was a great school for me. It was a great experience. And when I was in college, I actually was very into college politics. I was class president for 3 years. I thought I wanted to, I thought maybe I wanted to run for Congress or Senate one day. I was very interested in how we could, use my life as a way to help others in public service. And at the time, I did get a bit turned off from politics, even at that level. I mean, obviously, we can see what's gone on in the country over the last year. But I felt like, even politics at the College of New Jersey was a microcosm of what we see in the world. And I got a little turned off from it. And when I was a senior, I'm like, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't have plans, to get an internship or a job. And I thought to myself, if I could do something, that I was passionate about, what it would be. And my father had invented this small sporting goods product a few years before. And unfortunately, he had passed away the day before the patent came in the mail. And I don't know, it just seemed like it was the right thing to do at the time. So when I was a senior in college, I said, let me kind of finish it off for him, see if we can make some money for me, for my mom and sister, and maybe move on to something else. So that senior year, I was building this company while I was finishing my senior year. I launched the company at the Jacob Javits show in New York City. And we had a very good response. I ended up getting funding that summer. So I did go that route that I just kind of talked about. And I had an office in the city, I had a salary, and we gave it a shot for a few years, me with the partners that I had. And it didn't reach the success that we needed to sustain it. And we could talk more about that. I have a lot of thoughts on maybe why it didn't. Sure. But I was young too, right? I was really young. I was a bit inexperienced. And when I was 24, I was closing up the business. I was living back down in the Princeton area. I started taking classes at the University of Pennsylvania. I was in this pre-MBA program at Wharton. And I just thought to myself, well, I need to get a job now. Like that's really where it was at. I didn't necessarily say I wanted to be in finance or I wanted to go somewhere else, but I just needed to get a job. I was teaching tennis in Princeton. I was waitering at a Chili's restaurant on Route 1. And I was going to school part-time at UPenn because I didn't have those business courses. I was afraid that it would prevent me from getting, into a corporation. And I started interviewing, and then one day I lucked out and I got an interview at Merrill Lynch Asset Management.
Okay.
And it was based in Princeton, around Princeton, New Jersey area. And it was
What
a
was
marketing role,
your major back in undergrad?
political science.
Oh, okay. It wasn't politics. Okay. Got it.
It was political science. And, but I got an interview in marketing, and it led to, for me, it was a huge opportunity. And I always I started to find economics really interesting about what was going on in the world. And I kind of relate that to politics in a way.
Sure.
I spent 9 months in marketing. And then I got a job as a junior portfolio manager on their fixed income asset management desk.
Okay.
And then from that point, I just kind of followed it, right? I was learning a lot. It was a good industry to be in. I started taking the CFA, the Charter Financial Analyst exams, and I spent about maybe 2.5 more years on that desk, and then I moved to Citibank's headquarters in New York City, where I became, I would say, more of a senior portfolio manager within their securities lending group. Did that for 7 years, and then they brought me into sales, selling multiple products to institutions like central banks and asset managers, insurance companies. So, listen, I just kind of followed the path. I followed what I was interested in. I did find the financial markets very fascinating and economics fascinating, but I did started again midway through that 15 years, about that 7.5, I started to feel this wasn't the way for me. This wasn't the way for me. And that kind of leads.
It's really crazy to kind of see like the journey that so many folks go on. Some are planned and some are completely unplanned, where, you're a poli-sci, get into your dad's business, picking that up. And then in the blink of an eye, you're in the banking and investment world. So
exactly.
And now we're into the travel world. So you're kind of hitting all the bases here.
Yeah, I am. It's fun. I think in retrospect, I think I needed structure. I think for me, even having my father, passed away when I was 18, I think I needed safety. I needed structure. Felt like I didn't at that point, kind of felt like overnight, I really didn't have that's kind of that support that maybe I had before that. And you do find that within a corporate role, right?
Sure.
And I also, with the first company, I just wasn't ready yet. And I also don't think I was that passionate about his product. Like, it was for him, but I have seen that unless you're really passionate about what you're doing, if you're starting a company, it's going to be hard to make it work, right? Because you deal with a lot of ups and downs, as I'm sure you know, and you have to love it, right? So I know that this company feels very, very different than when I started my father's company in terms of my engagement and passion for it.
Yeah, and you've experienced the entrepreneur side and the corporate side, which I have not. I've always, I came right out of TCNJ, started this business in financial services, and it's all I've ever known. And there have been days, especially early on, where you kind of wake up and you're like, really, what should I be doing? Like, am I doing the right thing today? And you almost long for that structure of, it would kind of be nice to be told, hey, Bri, do A, B, and C, and you're done for the day. And do you miss that at all, that structure?
No, I don't. I felt like, to a degree, because the latter 7 years I was in sales, so I did have a manager, I was still structuring my day a bit. It's funny. Like, I in the beginning of my career in banking, I would say I was very more controlled about what I was doing. I was more told every day, and I think I started to become that entrepreneur within the organization.
Got it.
So I was preparing myself for leave. Like, I remember in the last 7 years I was in banking, like I would start, I wasn't in technology, but I started a project to replace our technology system. Right. I helped revamp all our marketing. So I would find these kind of they call them intrapreneur, like intrapreneur roles, where I was I was in training myself and getting myself ready for what I was really passionate about. I will say though, when I did leave banking though, it's been an evolution about you have to figure out a way out to make money. And it's very, very different where, even in a bad year, you could still be supported within the bank if you had a bad sales year or whatnot. So I still have been tweaking and changing and evolving my days, right? where I'm spending my time. You know, I'm trying to spend 90% of my time on activities that lead to revenue, and delegate those that are more operational in nature. And when I first left banking, though, I was much more, I would say 90% operational, 10% revenue. Because I couldn't let go of it. I wanted everything to be perfect. So I'm starting to really come out of that and evolve and switch. And I would say even in the last 6 months, like made some huge changes around that. And you see a difference. You see a difference as you change, the company starts to change as well. So, but I do like the freedom. Some days I do wake up and I'm like, well, what am I, what are the revenue things I should be focusing on? But I feel like at the moment we're in a pretty good groove with that.
Good. Yeah. And then you just kind of find it.
Yeah.
And so was there like that big kind of moment where you had that transition going from banking to being your own boss? Or was it, like you said, kind of like a slower segue where you didn't have that kind of cut the cord, what do we do now, kind of moment?
Yeah. And I'll address on one of your previous questions too, which I didn't answer yet, is in terms of like, did I really want to go into travel? I think, where I was at mentally 10 years ago is I was in a place where I was going through a lot of change in my life, and I knew I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And I had this dream where if I could wake up every day and do what I loved, I felt like that would be a great thing. And I noticed, like, when I went into my banking job every day, my energy would go down. And I was looking, and I noticed on the weekends and when I was hiking, my energy would go up. And I was very adamant about trying to put myself in a position where my energy was constantly, or most of the time, going up for the activities that I were doing, that I was getting energy from them, that I was getting motivation from them, not forcing it. And I wrote on a piece of paper, and this did not happen overnight. This was an evolution and a lot of like meditation and a lot of like personal development work that went into this. But I wrote down, I'm like, well, what do I really enjoy? And at the time I was really enjoying traveling. I was really enjoying adventure. And I was really enjoying like history and storytelling. Like, I've always loved history. So the company started out where I was like, well, maybe we can take people on adventures. So we're traveling adventures to these special places in the world that have an enormous amount of history and that tell stories. And I didn't see anyone else doing that at the time. So, the first tour we created, I had read a story about some famous Buddha legend in Nepal. And I got on a plane and I went to Nepal and I checked it out. And it was this old legend that this famous Buddha, Guru Rinpoche, was born on a lake in India through a lotus flower. So if you ever see a Buddha on a lotus flower, that's Guru Rinpoche, and he's known as the second Buddha. And he fought this great battle in the hills of Nepal, and it had to do with the spread of Buddhism, and it was just this beautiful, beautiful story. And when I went there, I was able to actually see that story in the sites I was visiting. Like, you saw these old caves that were 1,500 years old that apparently were, where he slept, and handprints of his on the cave, right? You trekked along this path where the cliffs were bright red, and that's apparently where he fought these demons in battle, right? That was their blood. And I was just really inspired by how these places were able to tell history through physical locations. So the first 3 tours that I put together was an expression of these. There was that specific tour in Nepal. We launched a tour in the Yukon, which is in Canada, on the Klondike Gold Rush, which is also a fascinating story. And then one in Chile called Crossing the Andes, which is about Jose de San Martin, which is basically the George Washington of South America, who helped liberate all of South America from Spanish rule. And at the time, I was just very fascinated by this, and I was very passionate about it. And it just, again, like I said, it made me feel very different from what I was doing. So again, when we launched the company, we launched with those 3 experiences. It was a lot of excitement about it.
And when you floated that out there, like, were people knocking down the door to sign on up, or were you like, where is everybody?
Well, I'll tell you this. people thought it was an amazing idea. We launched the company at the New York Times Travel Show in 2014, which is the biggest travel show in North America. Okay. And we won small booth out of 350 booths.
Wow, that's awesome.
And people love the concept, but as you know, getting clients is a whole different story, right? Mm-hmm. So it took me 2 years, just for context, it took me 2 years to launch the company, to work on it and build it. So from 2012 to 2014. And then it took me another year and a half to get our first sale. Wow. In mid 2015. So it was.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't leave banking in that first year.
Yeah. Well, the first experience I think was critical for that, because if I didn't have the experience out of college to realize how hard it was and how it took time, I could have seen myself taking the leap. So that first experience out of college, I think, informed the second decision. And I did have, because of that, I had in my mind that, listen, I had a good job. I was getting paid well. I said I would only leave banking if I felt there was no risk.
Okay. That
I was walking from one entity, my corporate role at Citibank, to this thriving travel company. And it took six and a half years to feel that. But I'll tell you this, I never thought it was going to come. At one, I was like, is this ever going to come? But it did come, and it got to the point where I felt there was more risk in staying.
Really? Wow. So it got to a point where like it was sustaining itself, where you could say, see you later banking, I'm financially okay in this new role.
Exactly. It was sustaining itself. I saw a future. I had, also, I talk a lot about this with people. I'd done enough personal development work on myself to get to a place where I felt confident in doing it. That's kind of like the journey of an entrepreneur. You do have to constantly evolve, as and constantly, do that work on yourself to improve. And I think there was a lot of stuff that I needed to do and a lot of stuff I needed to take care of in myself to get to a place to be able to run the company on my own.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's such a great lesson, because I know there's, plenty of business advice out there that will say kind of the opposite, almost like, burn the ships at sea. There's no way out. You got to go all in on this business or else you're shortcutting yourself, But then you see that there's kind of another method that I think most people would be more receptive to say, okay, I can pursue this passion or this goal, and it's not an all or nothing approach, which I think is much more palatable than kind of like cut the cord and dive in head first, Yeah.
It's, I respect the cut the cord point of view. I respect it. And if people can make that work, more power to you. But if you have financial responsibilities, if you have a family, if you have all these things, it's really hard to do that. And it can put a lot of extra pressure on you that might actually cause the company to fail more quickly, right? Because I just felt, for me, I couldn't, as I said before, I couldn't have had the company move any quicker. There's a lot of less things that I needed to learn that just takes time. It just doesn't happen overnight.
And if it's okay to ask, did, your employer at the time know that this whole thing was going on, or was it kind of like a hush hush thing on the side that you were doing?
No, at Citibank, like a lot of the banks, you are required to close. There's like an outside activities form that you have to fill out once a year. So I did disclose it. And, I think they were fine with it. They all thought it was just like Jeff going to climb another mountain. They thought it was just a side, fun project. I don't think anyone actually thought I was gonna leave the company one day. I think if I was starting like a bank, or if I was becoming like a financial advisor on the side, that would have been a big no-no. But it wasn't in competition with any of Citigroup's activities.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah. But when I did eventually have that conversation, they were very, very supportive of me and happy for me. And I did agree to stay on for a little bit just to help them with the transition. I think I'm a big believer there's always like a right way to also, leave and leave a company and even be thankful for everything that they did give me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a real win-win. So that's pretty cool. And going back to some of the travel experiences you mentioned, it was just jogging my memory. When I was a senior in college at TCNJ, I did travel abroad in Prague, and which was, as you know, like right in the heart of Europe and a gateway to so many other countries and everything. And I felt, in a way, I loved it. It was one of the best experiences of my life, but I almost felt spoiled that how would I travel after this when I was able to have 4 uninterrupted months, totally immersed in this culture with all these other kids my age and, really seeing the world. And it almost worried me in a way. I was like, I'm never going to really be able to travel again, because when am I going to just cut away for 4 months? Or when will I get to, make best friends and do all these things over there in a week? So what I wanted to ask is, do you have a typical travel size that you adhere to? And how long do you typically keep these trips that you host?
Yeah, I think listen, it depends, right? So I've seen on some of like the smaller group experiences that we have, like if you're hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro or on the Inca Trail in Peru, that you really don't want to go above 20 people, because you lose a little bit of above that, you lose a little bit of the camaraderie and the friendships that you can develop between people. As separately from that, from a financial perspective, if you're under 8 to 10 people, sometimes it doesn't make sense to even run the trip, which is a challenge with a lot of travel companies when they put like lots of dates on their on their websites. But so I would say we try to stick between 15 and 20 on our treks. I would say on our small adventures, but we do run ships around the world as well, right? So every year we do take a ship to Antarctica or the Arctic region, and that gets between, I would say, 100 and 120 people. But that's a different type of trip, and we do a lot to facilitate connection and togetherness, through that, not just on the trip, but before and after as well. So I think it depends on the type of trip, but I do definitely understand your point and your experience around that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So when you have these 15 to 20 people that go on a trek, like they're, couples that have all never met each other, or is it oftentimes just a big party of friends, or what's kind of that demographic look like?
It depends. It's kind of all over the map. Sometimes you'll see, you will see like a husband and wife, or, a boyfriend and girlfriend come on a trek. It's not surprising when I have, one guy who's maybe been on one of our trips before bring 3 friends along. But also, there will be times where there's about 6 or 7 singles as well. I think adventure seems to be a place where a lot of people do lean to when they're going through transitions in their life. So whether that's, a breakup of a relationship, a marriage, someone looking to change their work, we've seen a lot of people who are looking to use these experiences as a way to, I wouldn't say escape, but to as an opportunity for transformation. Mm-hmm. So
to kind of grow.
It's opportunity for transformation and growth. But I would say on most of our trips, about 50% of the people are singles. They're coming alone.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And are there a lot of competitors in this space? Because I mean, it sounds so exciting and like such a cool company. But are there a lot of other guys out there doing the same exact concept that you're doing?
Yeah, I would say there's a fair bit of adventure travel companies out there. In the U.S., I mean, maybe there's 5 to 6 big players in it, right? We're still, I would say, on the smaller side, but those are categorized into 3 types of trips. First off, there's some low end players where they're just more giving you kind of the bare minimum where you got to pay a lot of extra. Then there's like, I would say companies that are more in the medium price point and then more higher end, right? I think we're probably between the medium and the higher end. I think our trips tend to be all inclusive. We're trying to do the best that we can in terms of hotels and service and the places that we go, but we're not sometimes going as far as as like doing like a glamping experience, right? We still want to get you into nature and get you to experience these magnificent places. Why I think we're a little different is, we really focus on 2 areas. When I started the company, as I mentioned, we had more of a historical tilt to it, where we were focusing on these historical adventures, and we still have those and we still sell those. But over the past 3 or 4 years, or I say 3 years, the company is more tilted to like social impact. So I feel like I've been reconnecting to more of that, what I was interested in college at TCNJ. So we do a lot of experiences where we're partnering with conservationists or climate change activists and other types of individuals where we're trying to push social missions through these experiences. And one example is we work with Robert Swan, who's a famous climate change activist, and a famous polar explorer, and we work on a few trips with him each year where we're trying to help in the fight against climate change. And we bring people to these incredible places so they could see what's going on for themselves with their own eyes. We bring leaders to train them on these subjects and help them even on their missions as they return home to try to have a positive impact on the planet. I don't, to the degree that we're doing social impact adventures, I don't know if there's anyone else in the space doing it to the degree that we are. And I mean, frankly, we're moving most of the company to that direction, right? So it's something that, because I have that flexibility and I don't have partners, I'm able to very very maneuver the company in the direction where, what I'm feeling, right? Where I'm finding the most connection. So I listen to myself and I follow that.
And you're finding people are pretty receptive to that of learning, a lot of the social change as opposed to just, hey, here's the Coliseum.
Yeah, I mean, people love travel. I mean, it's a certain type of, we're going after a certain type of traveler too, right? There's people who just want to go on, like you said, see the Coliseum and see history and go on like more of a joy holiday. But there are a lot of people out there who want to, who are looking for purpose in their lives, right? Who love travel, who want to protect the planet and want to help others. And we're really able to figure out how to we're figuring out how to tap into them and to work with them. And it's very inspiring when you have someone come on a trip and, they feel like their life's changed and they come back and they say they started a foundation to help, we have one guy who's starting a foundation now to help people who have multiple sclerosis, to take them on adventures to help them heal. So
that's so cool.
You get a lot. I mean, at least me and my team get personally a lot more than that when we do just more of a generic trip to the Inca Trail.
Yeah. Is this something that you think you'd ever pitch to like a travel channel or something? Just because it does have that unique slant to it with the social change and so forth. Yeah.
I mean, we have over the last year and a half, we've had about 3 or 4 different things going on in that arena. We've had discussions with a number of companies, and we have a few things actively going on now. Some of it was delayed because of COVID, but more and more people are recognizing like what we're doing. Disney recently licensed some footage from one of our tree plantings with Jane Goodall in Africa that's playing at Epcot, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Masterclass has licensed some footage from us. But we're being approached around those type of media opportunities more and more.
That's so cool. And that's kind of a segue to what I wanted to ask next, Jeff, is like, what's the future hold? Is it just getting into the social aspect like you alluded to, or do you want to get to be this huge company or more of a niche company with like loyal customers? Or what do you foresee for the future?
I don't look super far ahead because I've seen that I continue to change and evolve, and you never really know what life takes you. I don't necessarily have this goal of being this massive travel company. I do want to continue to be very aligned with where I'm at as a person. So I want the company to be a reflection of how I'm growing, what I'm passionate about, and the things that I am passionate about are the various like social and political issues in the world. So so if I was saying right now where I would want to take it, I'd like to do more of the social and like the more of the environmental trips that we do. Okay. I'd like to, we've started to do a little bit around taking people who have either physical or mental injuries into the mountains, into experiences to help them rebuild. We've seen people have transformational experiences in those types of situations where they're able to see how strong they are through these adventures. So I think for me, again, I'm on this perpetual search for like connection and meaning, and the company is a reflection of that. So I want to continue to do that work and see where it goes. I'll say one more thing. It's very interesting is every once in a while, like I'll spend a little bit of my time on one of more of our generic trips, when it's, ones that typically sell really well. I've noticed less and less that those trips haven't been selling as well as the trips that have the more the social impact trips, at least for us. For other companies, they sell great, but for us, it doesn't seem like they are. And I'm not really so sure why, but maybe it's because we're putting more energy around the ones that we're passionate about. Maybe it's what we're supposed to be doing. I'm not sure, but I
Yeah,
think,
you're kind of
I think,
attracting it to you, through your
yeah,
passion.
it's weird. It's like, I think a lot about it. Like, why is that happening? And then, I'm like, oh, well, it's easy to get some money here and some income here, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
so for us, the income and the money to support, myself and our team and the things that we're doing around the world is primarily coming from the trips where there's the most impact and the most that we're passionate about. So really
awesome.
fascinating, but still haven't figured out fully why,
Yeah,
but
it's
I'm just going to
funny
go with
how
it.
things work out like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And coincidentally, I just had on the show a few weeks ago, Jordan Babineau, who is a great football player for the Seahawks for a long
Okay.
time. And he just came out with a book called Pivot to Win, and how to kind of pivot through like these different phases of life. His, obviously from the NFL into business and so forth. But that's one of the things he mentioned a lot of was you got to kind of put out there like this positive energy of what you want and what you're going for.
Yep.
And then it draws in, results that some in odd way kind of align themselves with that. And it's unique because it sounds like this has almost been like a similar conversation with just kind of like a different basis with travel.
So that definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I was asking about the Travel Channel because one of my favorite shows back in the day was I think it was called Dhani's Adventure.
Okay.
And it was Dhani Jones. Also, he was another football guy. Did you ever see this show?
I did not. No.
I don't know why. It was only like 2 seasons. I don't know why it didn't last. But what he would do is he'd go travel to, a famous part of the world, whether it was, in Italy or Russia or wherever it could be. And then not only did you get to see that part of the world, but about half the show was kind of learning their most famous sport. So he would go to Moscow, but then he would learn like a Russian style of wrestling. So he'd learn all about Moscow, but then like in between his travels, he was going to like some gym there, with these guys wrestling and kind of learning their way of life. And then he'd go to Brazil and learn how to play soccer. And it was really cool because it threw in like a sport element to the travel wherever he went. But it seemed kind of similar. Yeah, it was really, really cool, but kind of similar with how you're doing the social aspect, with each trip. So
I like that. I'll check it out.
Very neat. So what's a normal day like in your business? What's, just to kind of give some of our listeners some insight to somebody that made this jump from kind of a normal role to, a real passion project that you get to live through now.
So I'm very careful about structuring my day, and it's continuing to evolve. So each week, but I start. I wake up around 7:30. I've spent years waking up at 5 a.m. from when I was in banking, so I refuse to do that anymore. So I wake up about 7:30 or 8. I do spend a little time on like reflection, and I'm very big into like meditation and yoga. So I usually do meditate in the morning, and then around I eat breakfast, and around 9 o'clock I start my first meeting. I usually structure the morning typically to do things that would move the company forward, because I've seen that I have my most energy and my mind is clearest in the morning. So from like 9 to 12, I'll do like more big, again, I call them big projects or something that would impact revenue. I use Boomerang, which is a kind of like an app software that queues up my emails. So, and what that does is I can't see my emails until 12, like all my emails queue up so I can't see them. I guess in the back end of my inbox, and then they hit at 12 and then they hit at 4.
I've never heard of that.
So, yeah, it's great. And because a lot of people, what they do is they get stuck to just answering emails all day, and it really destroys productivity. So I'll see my first load of emails at 12. And then I always take 12 to 1 off for lunch and to just to some downtime, because again, it just feels like it's very important. It feels like it's my time. And then, I'll probably do calls from like 1 to 3, and then from 4 to, 4 to, maybe even 1 to 4, and from 4 to 6, I'll work on my emails.
Okay.
Now the old me when I was in banking would literally work from like, 7 to 6 in banking, and then get home and work from 8 to 12 on my company. And I did that for 6.5 years. Wow. And I worked on weekends. So it did take a lot. Like I didn't have much of a social life, And
I'm happy you shared that, Jeff, because some people think like you just kind of snap your fingers and the business is there. And, and if you want to have that transition where, like we keep saying, you're not cutting the cord, go for it, but it's going to take a ton of hours, like you just said.
It was an enormous effort. And, but listen, I had so much motivation for the company to make it work. Like if I had a bad day in finance, I would just be more motivated at night to make it work. And I felt how different I felt when I was working on my company. So I can see the dichotomy of the two, but in terms of like, I was even working a lot of hours and up until the last year and a half, but I started to see that, I try to stop at 6 now. Now, every once in a while I'm doing a late call if we're dealing with someone from Asia or Australia, but I try to stop at 6 p.m. and I try to like enjoy my night, because I'm starting to see now that if I push it, if I work more than 9 hours or something like that, like my productivity goes down, and I actually get really tired for the next day. So I'm not as productive the next day. So I've really been working on my balance for the last, and I'm still not perfect at it, but I'm trying. I'm trying to work on my balance where I'm enjoying my evening, getting to sleep early, getting to sleep by 10 if I can. And then, waking up and doing it again, like coming up with like a really solid routine that's balanced, because I just think it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And as we speak, I'm actually in the middle of Andrew Carnegie's biography. I don't know if you've read a whole lot about him.
I haven't, but I know about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the richest guys that ever lived, had Carnegie Steel. But one of the things I found really unique about him is by the time he was 40, he never worked more than 2 hours a day. And he had gotten to the point in his early to mid 30s. I mean, he came to such enormous wealth so early by, hard work and some luck, I'm sure. But I found it unique that he was able to kind of give away so much of that responsibility and delegate to so many managers and partners early on, that by the time he was 40, he said he'd wake up, wherever he was, work from maybe 9 to 11, and then he was done for the day. And he would take the entire summer every year to go on these cottage trips all around Europe, and or coach trips, he called them. And I was like, wow, this is amazing that, he had his 20s where he was just an absolute beast. Yeah. And then he kind of almost semi-retired from there and really dedicated a lot of it to writing and traveling, which I thought was pretty cool.
I like that. Thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely pick up that book as well. I mean, that actually resonates with me, because I had thought that I was going to be working 80, 90 hours a week the rest of my life, but I actually can see a path to that now. If you have a strong team and you get really good at delegating and choosing on how to hire and whatnot, I notice myself, I'm getting very, very efficient with my days.
That's good. That's great.
And so it's good. But I'll definitely check that out. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's worth the read. And it was kind of interesting because it does seem a bit hypocritical at points, where he would often write to all his managers and partners, like, you need to see the world, you need to rest, you need to recharge. Yeah. But then he would give them 1,000 tasks to do that he demanded get accomplished. So it's well, easy for you to say when you're, on the beach.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that for a time in banking. So I get that. Yeah.
So maybe just to wrap up here, one thing I love doing with our guests, and you've had a very interesting journey, to say the least, is a quick lightning round where we get to ask some questions and kind of know a little bit more about you. And if you're okay with that, we could dive right in.
Yeah.
Cool. So first up, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
When I was young, I actually dreamt of being an explorer.
Okay. Fitting. That definitely fits. That's awesome. And do you have a quote that you try and live by?
I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell. And he has a quote. I can't recall the exact wording of it, but it's basically, it's something like fear is the end, like follow fear, basically. And I think I live by that, because I've noticed that every day, if I'm trying to figure out where to go next, if I address any fear that I feel in my body or in my mind, that it usually shows me the next step of the path.
Got it. And what's your favorite movie?
Braveheart.
I love it. That's in my top 3.
Yeah.
And this will be a good question for you. What's your favorite destination or vacation?
I love Peru.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I'll do this really quick. So, but Peru is from an adventure standpoint and culture and people. I love it. It's magnificent. But again, I'm starting to get to a point where I would love to have some just more enjoyable like trips where I'm not so much like running up a mountain or something like that. So I'd love to revisit places like Venice or the beautiful water cities of Europe. And then I'm dreaming of going to like a nice island, which I haven't been in 20 years, like a Turks and Caicos. So yeah, long answer, but. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it depends on your mood. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's kind of similar? What's your favorite food?
What's my favorite food? I'm Italian, so I do Italian food, pizza.
Okay. Awesome.
Pasta.
And then just kind of keeping with the overall vibe of this, it is a business and a finance show to some extent. What would you say was the worst investment you ever made? Could be money or otherwise.
I never regret anything, but I did spend, I mean, you're in the, you know about investments, right? So I did spend a lot of time on this test called the CFA. And I had this, I got through to the third level and then I changed jobs and I failed at the that third level and I just never took it again because it was just such a bear to take. Mm-hmm. But I had always thought that if I got a certain degree, right, or if I got a certain license, then that would get me to where I needed to be. And I think in retrospect, I don't necessarily agree with that. I see people chasing MBAs and all these things. And I think if you want to put that in your mind that you're going to need that to get to where you need to be, then that's what's going to happen. So I think I do think I actually wasted a lot of time taking that test and putting too much emphasis on school and licenses, as opposed to now, actually, I don't know, it's come off the wrong way. I think you need a base of education, but I put a lot less on that. I think if it's something that you want, you can go after. You don't necessarily need a certain title or degree to get there. Yeah.
And not to interrupt, but there's a quote that I love from Cool Runnings. If you ever seen that,
one of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I believe it's the coach tells Derice when they cheat, and they want to, get the gold, and they get, or I'm sorry, the coach was the one who cheated, and Derice kind of understands like how badly you could want to get the gold medal to do something like that. And he says, listen, if you weren't anything when you didn't have a gold medal, you'll never be anything with the gold medal.
Love it. Yeah.
And
I love that.
that always resonated. And then lastly, what would you say was the best investment?
The best investment has been the personal development work that I've done on myself. As I mentioned, I do an enormous amount that people don't see behind the scenes. Like I work with coaches, I work with mentors, I have worked with like meditation and yoga coaches. I have seen that the more that I work on myself, and I sometimes refer to it as kind of healing any past wounds or, work on my emotions, that I'm able to see the next steps. I'm able to be more clear, and my company opens up more as well, and my life opens up. And I'm not a big reader I don't read many business books. I maybe read half of one over the last 10 years, but for me, what helps more is to do this work and work with people who expand consciousness and get more clear and heal. So that's been my best investment and something I continue, to this day.
Great. That's awesome. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jeff. I think this was a terrific conversation that our listeners can take quite a bit away from. Is there anything just kind of in closing that you want to make sure everybody hears, or anything out there as far as where people could find you and your company?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, again, thank you for taking the time to have me on. I really enjoyed our discussion. For everyone out there listening, like depending wherever you are in life, your life can change, right? So if you aren't necessarily happy and you do have a dream, you go after it. I think that the caveat I will make is that, as we talked about, a lot of people think you need to take this leap of faith, but you don't necessarily need to do that. You can structure these changes and these pivots to not disrupt your current life that much, and do more of the slow and steady approach to it, which I think can be extremely rewarding and can also be very intelligent going about it that way, and make it less risky. So if you have a dream, go after it, but consider there's another approach. In terms of where to find me and my company, My company is called The Explorer's Passage. That's Explorer with an S, PASSAGE.com. You can check us out. You can check our tours out. And in the fall of 2020, I did my first TEDx talk, which if you Google Jeff Bonaldi, Bonaldi, you can check that out as well. And I talk a little bit about my journey and how I got to where I am today. So I'd love for you to see it.
Cool. Well said. Well, thank you again, Jeff, for coming on today's show. This was fantastic. And everyone that's been tuning in, please keep tuning in, leaving us a good review wherever it is that you're listening. I'm your host, Brian Caderna, and thank you for joining us on another episode of the Caderna Podcast. We'll see you next week.